Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watch One, and thanks for logging on. Today, we're looking at the Harry Winston Project Z6 Black Edition, 44mm in PVD Zalium. This is one of 300 made in a limited edition for the 2011 model year. Now, Harry Winston, best known for high-end gemstones, has been making watches in the luxury sector since 1989. Now, they entered the high horology market in 2001 with the famed Opus series, and they launched the Zalium series in 2004. This, representing the sixth in the Zalium series, is an alarm with a most nuanced setting system and extraordinary finish, both in terms of its stark appearance and the detail work on its dial and its impressive movement. But before we get into depth, let's put it on the wrist and get an impression of how it fits and how it feels. Now, on my wrist, 6 1/3 inches, 16 centimeters in circumference, you can see the Project Z6 wears big. It is every millimeter of its 44. Now, some watches wear bigger, some watches wear smaller. I'm going to say this one wears a big 44. Because of the unique junction at the lugs, the way the natural rubber strap has a double joint that actually flares it out, it causes it to want to wear as though it were a larger timepiece with longer lugs than it actually has. And again, on my wrist, 16 centimeters in circumference, I think you're seeing something like the lower limit for comfortable and secure sizing for this timepiece. It has a lot of presence and it wants a lot of wrist. But at 14 millimeters thick, considering the degree of complication that's present inside this case, I've got to say it doesn't sit that high on the wrist. So that is one respect in which it is not truly massive. Another respect is, well, mass. Constructed of Zalium, an alloy of aluminum and zirconium, this is something Harry Winston pioneered since 2004 in the watch sector. It's generally used for aerospace applications, and it's very light. It's harder than aluminum, but it's about as light as titanium on the wrist. So what you actually feel is far less massive, oppressively heavy than the visual impression of the watch suggests. So light on the wrist, just big on the wrist. That's my impression. That's the takeaway. But everything that touches the wrist is of exceptional quality. You can see the vulcanized natural rubber strap here is beautifully made, and it has a very silky feel to the back. That's the mark of it, the best of the natural rubber straps. It's usually something that Hublot does very well. Harry Winston matches Hublot blow for blow in that case. Now, the double deployant clasp that secures the watch is a beautifully made piece, very delicate, low profile. When it's closed, it really doesn't read as part of the watch. It just blends into the strap itself, but nicely machined, beautifully finished, and with a clever double plunger twin trigger release, very secure, very positive in the hands. Despite its size and delicate frame, it's actually a tactile pleasure and very impressive as a piece of micro manufacture in its own right. But I do want to shout out to the case itself. Flat across the back, very comfortable on the wrist, nicely designed, and that continues topside with the shape of the lugs and the shape of the bezel. Now, there's a small amount of grooving and stepping that adds character lines to what would otherwise be a very stark, monolithic black case, so it does have definition. It doesn't read as a big monoblock, even though it certainly has a stance that's completely alien on the wrist compared to the conventional bright metallic Z6. Now, moving in from that all-black Zalium case onto the dial, there's a lot going on, but I'm going to say this. Compared to the standard bright metallic Z6 Zalium, the Z6 Black Edition is actually easier to read. Now, a lot of times black on black watches can lack for contrast, but what I'm seeing here is a dial in which the hours and the minutes are easily read with high contrasting Arabic numerals that are calibrated to show the hours, as well as minute hashes around the interior and outer circumference of the dial, and all of the indications of the secondary functions, the day-night indicator for the civil time, the day-night indicator for the alarm, as well as the alarm set, a double digital set, and the alarm on and off, very easy to pick up, and I like the fact that it stands out, the combination of contrast and the clever, beautiful, really thoughtful use of color, right down to the blued screws that are exposed on the dial itself. Well done. Harry Winston has an eye for design, irrespective of gemstones or watches, and that continues here. Now, you can see that this movement, partially exposed via partial skeletonization, is a bit more elaborate than your typical alarm. When I played it at the beginning of the segment, you could hear a governor running in the background, and it had almost a musical chime, very much like the mechanism of a minute repeater. And that's the impression I get, both from the shape and finish of the striker and from the sustained bright tone that it gives off when it's activated. Now, it does have an on-off feature, so you can see I can actually toggle between the alarm on and off, and I have a gauge on the dial to tell me whether the alarm is armed. But what I also have is a day-night indicator. There's actually two. There's one for the time of day, mounted right here at 11 on the civil time dial, and that tells me if it's day or night where I am. And then I have a secondary, more imaginative, more interpretive AM/PM indicator right above the double digital time setting for the alarm. What that allows me to do is actually set the alarm for instance, 5:30 p.m., which it is now, or 5:30 a.m. if I have to get up for an early flight, and that's completely unique. As far as I know, there is no other watch available with an alarm function that allows you to distinguish between AM and PM. Normally, the best you'll do is some sort of lock-unlock function, so you can disarm the watch when you know it won't be needed. For instance, you don't want a 12 a.m. wake-up call, but you're going to need it for a meeting at noon, then you arm it. This watch gives you the ability to turn off the alarm to keep it wound and energized, but significantly, it also gives you the ability to set the time precisely over a 24-hour span, any time of the day. Very well done, very thoughtful on the part of Harry Winston and its manufacturer movement supplier, Chronode. Now, there's a lot more to the watch, and that is the Harry Winston arch form. On the crown side, you can see the arches, which are signature to the company and have been ever since they started making watches, are here deployed as a sort of crown guard, and the integration of the pusher, the toggle on-off for the alarm, with a symmetrical crown guard design and the Harry Winston arches is unobtrusive and clever because it takes a required mechanical function and a required aesthetic cue of the Harry Winston Project Z series, and it integrates them into a functional element that's symmetrical, beautiful, and if you didn't actually push this on-off toggle, you wouldn't even know it's there. That's complication at its best, functional but hidden. And when you turn the watch over, there's even more to see. Arguably, there's the most to see. What you're looking at is the Harry Winston Caliper 1010. Now, this movement is built for Harry Winston by their movement partner Chronode of Leloc, and that's interesting because a lot of times there is a view of the Harry Winston watchmaking operation as being of two tiers. There's the Opus series, which is above and beyond, watches designed in short runs by star watchmakers, paid for and facilitated by Harry Winston. And then there are the, quote, mass-produced Harry Winstons, of which this is one, granted one of only 300. But the bottom line is, the Harry Winston standard line also includes a lot of input from revered independents. And in fact, Peter Spake-Marin helped to design the Ocean Tourbillon series, and Jean-Francois Mojon of Chronode, he of the Opus 10, actually had input into the construction of this caliber based on Chronode's own C501 alarm unit. And there is a lot going on here. Twin barrels, one for the mainspring that runs the watch with a 72-hour power reserve, and one that actually runs the alarm for up to 20 seconds when fully wound. Now, the clever thing here is you wind them both. Let me show you how this works. You wind them both from a single crown. So you see both barrels are being wound from a single crown with a single motion, and then there are safety units to disengage each as it reaches full wind. All aspects of the movement are very thoughtfully laid out. It's important to note that the detail factor is very high, and that's evident in things like a mini column wheel selector used to ensure crisp function of the on-off toggle. You can see it right above my thumb. A mini column wheel, and its sole purpose is to rotate between the on-off toggle of the alarm function. So not only do you get an on-off toggle, but you get a precision-engineered and manufactured column wheel, just like a very high-end chronograph, solely to regulate the on-off indicator and the on-off function for the alarm. I really like that. Now, moreover, there is machinery in here connected to the barrel that drives the alarm that amounts to a governor of the type that you would find on a minute repeater, so that the chime has sufficient time to resonate in between strikes, and the governor runs with an inertial, I believe an inertial damper that restricts the speed at which the barrel can unwind and release its energy. thus giving the striker enough time to strike, giving the gong time to chime, to ring, to die, and then be struck again, so that the cycle isn't interrupted or out of phase with the harmonic of the gong itself. Beautifully thought out and really clever in execution. What you're getting here isn't so much an alarm watch, but sort of a junior minute repeater, and that's evident in the way that the alarm regulator itself is put together. Now, outstanding finish is evident throughout. I should mention that each of these movements is certified as a chronometer by Chronode before it leaves the factory. So before this watch was delivered to Harry Winston, it was regulated in 5 positions at 3 temperatures to chronometer standards. So the bottom line is it's not just beautiful and clever, but it's very accurate. So there's just about everything you would want in a movement, but I want to end on the finish of the movement because you'll see alternating black polish on separate elements. You'll see straight-grained dressage brushing on others, like the levers of the complication actuators. You can see that black polish evident on each of these polished screw heads with their slots beautifully chamfered. There's gorgeous, fat, mirror-polished anglage on the bridges, of which there are many, and I like the fact that of the many types of anglage treatment available, Chronode, when they finish these in-house, use a broad anglage so you can really get an eyeful of it at close range without even having to resort to a loop. And of course, there's a radial dressage on each of these spring barrels. Gorgeous to look at. There's a lot going on here. This is a very complex movement, and given everything that goes into it, given the input of Chronode and the pedigree that they have, after all, not only have they designed the Opus 10 for Harry Winston, but they were involved in the MB&F Legacy Machine No. 1 and No. 2, the MCT Sequential 1, the Urban Jurgensen Chronometer Detent Escapement P8. That's the kind of heavy metal, hardcore horology pedigree that goes into designing the C501 that forms the basis for the Harry Winston 1010 you see here. So not only is this a beautiful movement in an unconventional striking, but strangely quite functional, legible, and easily distinguishable timepiece, but you're getting the total package in a true sports watch because this is a 10 ATM, 100 meter, 330-foot water-resistant sports watch that you can take in the pool, you can wear it when you're jumping in the ocean. The bottom line is the watch is part of the Harry Winston Ocean collection, and the Project Z, the Zalium series, is within that collection. So you get that rough and tumble durability and wear it all the time flexibility with a beautiful, unconventional, and undoubtedly distinctive look and a movement that can trade blows with the absolute finest in the high horology stakes. If all that sounds good, heck, if that alarm sounded good to you, then this Harry Winston Project Z6 Black Edition, one of only 300 made, just may be the watch you want.